Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're going to be reviewing Heritage by the band Opeth.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
Here's my favorite bit from this album. Oh, what an unfortunate reintroduction with Opeth. I am sure that if you asked any fan of this band what their favorite album would be, this would usually not be the first call people would tell you. It's not considered to be one of their greatest albums, definitely not a bad album per se, but they definitely have some better stuff to show for. But as I said, I am just following orders here. Now you might have noticed that I said that this is my reintroduction with Opeth, and that's because back around like 2017 I actually used to listen to Blackwater Park. At least I listened to it like a few times, and I remember having one particular song from there which I really liked. But for some unknown reason, this kind of memory just was blocked from my brain and went into nothingness. Like, I know that it happened, but I just don't remember it happening. It feels like some sort of a fever dream I had, and it's so odd because I distinctly remember listening to Opeth back then with Blackwater Park and actually liking it. So I feel like I don't know this band, but at the same time, factually, I know that I know them. Now, this far into the series, when I saw that we were going to be listening to an Opeth album, I was actually kinda happy because I really wanted to get to them in this year, and I'm glad that I am. Now, I know that this is extreme sort of death metal music, but I've proved time and time again that I can really like it, and it's also a plus in my book, the fact that these guys are Swedish. The only thing I was kind of wearisome of the fact that I really have never heard of an album by theirs called Heritage. You know, even if you don't know Opeth's music, you probably have heard of albums like Still Life, Blackwater Park, and Ghost Reveries. But Heritage is just not one that I've ever heard of, and it kinda got me thinking. My guess is as follows. When I was collecting recommendations to make this series in the first place, I asked a lot of people, and my assumption is that the person who recommended this album to me is probably someone who is well versed in the entire discography of Opeth, and instead of choosing his favorite as, you know, like let's say the mainstream ones, much like we would choose Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon as like the most basic favorite per se, but each and every Pink Floyd fan has his own thing, like I do with Atom Heart Mother. So do I believe that this type of person said, you know what, my favorite is a special one and it would be Heritage, and I get that, it's fine, but I don't think that they've really thought about how this will introduce me to the band and how I will react to this one, especially as a newcomer to Opeth. Nevertheless, let's talk a bit of backstory. So Opeth formed back in 1990 by vocalist David Isberg, and Isberg named the band after the mythical / fictional city, South African city, Opeth. Now, the first few years of Opeth were just so hectic, with people coming in and out of the band on a monthly basis, to the point where even the band's founder himself, Isberg, he also left the band in those few first years. Now, I really won't go into the lore of the Opeth band along the years, but one thing that you must know is that there's this one person, his name is Mikael Åkerfeldt, and he is basically up until today the frontman of the band, despite not being an original member of it. Now, the band would release their debut album in 1995, and they would also release 3 albums up until 1999, in which they released them, but they actually really didn't tour them. But all of this would change with the 2001 release of Blackwater Park, which would be proven a very noteworthy album that the band toured a lot on a nationwide scale. And the following years have proved very faithful for the band, and the band would grow on in popularity and gain more and more fans around the world, cementing themselves as one of the best progressive metal acts out there, and that's how we get to the first major year that we have to talk about, which is 2010. By this point it has been 2 years since Opeth have released any album, and the fans were starting to think to themselves whether a new album was even in the works, when in 2010 Åkerfeldt suddenly released a statement on the band's website stating that he was working on composing a new Opeth album, which would also be co-produced by Steven Wilson. And this album would be eventually released in September of 2011, and it would actually receive very strong reviews when it was released, which is also saying that it had some really good reviews. Now, a lot of people were surprised to see that this one didn't include any death growls, which was definitely an interesting direction for the band, as well as just being more melodic as a whole. And as the band did with the rest of their albums up until this point at least, they toured the heck out of this one, and they actually really did a worldwide tour, not just going to Europe and the USA, but actually going to places like India, Japan, Latin America, and even your homegirl's country here being Israel. But yeah, for the purpose of today's video, I'm gonna stop right here, and I'm not gonna talk more about the lore of Opeth because we still actually have one more album of theirs to review on episode 309, which will be Damnation. And well, I'm happy that I said what I said and at the long time that it took, because honestly I needed to buy time in this video because I have absolutely nothing to say about this album's music. Now, this album just really came and went like nothing. I don't remember enjoying it, I don't remember suffering from it, I don't really remember feeling a lot about it. It just was, and then it ended. The only thing I really remember is that time got substantially slower when listening to it. I was kind of waiting for it to end. As I said, I didn't suffer through it, it just kind of dragged on and dragged more and more. I was definitely surprised by how un-Opeth-like it sounded. Despite not really remembering what this band sounds like, I did know that they were a death metal band and that they did have a sort of extremity to their music, but this music on this album really didn't sound like that, and that was definitely surprising. I do get that it was more proggier probably than most of their works and definitely more melodic. Just kind of really didn't do anything for me. The only track aside from like the cheaty little opener that they have of Heritage that really did something with me had to be the song Slither. Slither was a nice track. I think it had like a few moments which I genuinely really enjoyed, but honestly not a really redeeming track, especially not in the grandeur of this entire album. And that's about it. I'm sorry for this very lackluster personal review of this one, but this has just been nothing, like nothing. I feel nothing about this album, and it's so odd to say it. But yeah, let's move on to talking about this cover. I love the fact that there is this sort of consistency and idea of portraying covers like this one. You know, the only real way I can really make you understand what I'm talking about is just making some comparisons. I feel like this one has a lot to do with the same look as All Traps on Earth, or even In the Search of the Lost Chord by the Moody Blues. There just might be a hell of a lot of symbolism to be found on this one, but personally I feel like it's very much overcrowded. It might tell a story, but it seems like it's telling, you know, a bunch of different stories. There's so much to go through on here. There's a town, it's burning, people are going, there's heads on a tree and they're taking hands from the tree, and there's devils in the roots, and I don't care about that. I really don't, honestly, unless I was like owning this album in a very physical copy and I was listening to it many times, and I would stop by and actually try and understand this cover. Maybe it would be fine, but this cover is just too overcrowded in ideas and imagery for something to be very noticeable and tangible from it. I think that this is one of the albums which I've been most indifferent to on this entire list, and of course being indifferent to an album gives it a very indifferent rating of 5 out of 10. But yeah, that's about it guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're going to be listening to Beat by King Crimson. Yes, very exciting. I of course want to thank my lovely supporters over on Patreon, so thank you so much to Clay Warren, Mr. Kings, and Lindsay Haycox. You guys are just the best, and if any of you want to support me over on Patreon, you can find the link down in the description or in my about page. But that's about it guys, have a wonderful day and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye guys.